Hello, everyone, and welcome to JB Solo Gaming, where today we are doing our first ever podcast. This isn't necessarily a thing that I know if we're going to do all that often, but we're doing kind of a special thing where we are talking specifically about the topic of the return of point-and-click adventure games. And with me today, I have my friend Steve, who has quite a bit more experience than I do with point-and-click adventure games, and we're going to talk specifically about mostly about Thimbleweed Park and also Paradigm, and about the whole idea of the return to this genre. So actually I'm going to throw it over to Steve here first, and I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about our experiences with the genre, that interested us in the first place about this whole aspect of gaming.
Well, John, thank you for allowing us to speak here, and hopefully this will be helpful to your channel. I first came into adventure games in the late 80s. I believe Maniac Mansion was featured on the cover of Nintendo Magazine, which way back then almost everyone had a subscription to that. I did not actually purchase it for the NES. I purchased the PC version a couple years down the road and got hooked on the genre. Played that, played Monkey Island, played Loom, The Dig, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango, all the way through Monkey Island 3, etc., until like the LucasArts brand kind of fell apart because they went on to do mostly Star Wars games. I do not have as much experience on the Sierra side of the adventure games genre, but hopefully I can give some perspective on things, especially considering, full disclosure, I did back the latest adventure game, Thimbleweed Park, on Kickstarter. So my view may be through rose-colored glasses, so just keep that in mind.
Now, have you played any of the remasters? Like they did the Grim Fandango remaster. I know they're doing Full Throttle as well.
Yeah, in fact, yes, Full Throttle got a remaster, Grim Fandango got a remaster. I have not played either of them yet on the remaster. I think GOG gave me a key to do Grim Fandango, or as a Steam key, I can't remember which, but I have the game remastered because I got it in a bundle, but I have not played it yet. Well, and what about you, John? What is your interest or history with the adventure game genre?
All right. Well, and thank you for coming on and talking about this. I mean, part of the reason for me why I especially wanted you to talk about it a little bit is I have very limited experience. I came into the genre more recently. Growing up, I played a lot of, at least on the PC, RPGs, and then actually those Star Wars games you were talking about, I spent a lot of time in X-Wing and TIE Fighter. So I was excited when LucasArts took that turn, but I did get to experience some of the game. Other people I knew growing up had the games. Not a lot of these types of games. Even some of the... I did play, actually, I'm trying to remember some of the Sierra games. I believe Gabriel Knight, I played at least one of those. I don't remember which one.
Series, yes.
I actually had forgotten that I played that until you mentioned Sierra. I was like, oh, I did play some of that. And then some, not necessarily point-and-click adventure, but like Seventh Guest and stuff like that has some similarities to the genre that my friends had, and we puzzled over those puzzles for many hours, because a big problem with this genre back in the day sometimes was obtuse puzzles that involved rubbing things on things until something happened. But and we didn't have the internet, so even if you wanted to look something up, you'd have to use like Nintendo Magazine or something to do that. But more recently, I was excited to check out Broken Age, which I have played all the way through, and we were talking previous, and you said you've played probably the majority of it, but not all of it. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoy the sense of humor that a lot of these games tend to have. I was really enjoying the story in the first half, looking forward to seeing where it was going, anticipating that second half, and then it came out, and I was disappointed both with the story and some of the puzzles. There was one in particular I thought was insane, but...
well, it couldn't be worse than the soup cans in the Seventh Guest.
Oh, it's funny, I was thinking of that one specifically, actually, when I was talking about that. Oh, gosh, yeah, there were a few times, but that one... Oh, I don't even... It was one of those... I didn't actually own it, but my friend did. I remember we just like spent an entire day moving cans around.
If I remember correctly, it's the soup cans, the microscope, and the 8 queens on a chessboard are the 3 most difficult puzzles in the 7th Guest.
Yeah. So I think I have very few memories, but mostly fond of the genre, except for that one major issue. And like I said, I really enjoyed the first half of Broken Age, but I'm really interested in this kind of comeback of the genre. Quite a few of these genres we grew up with are coming back. The 3D platformer with ukulele that has mixed reviews, and the CRPGs have come back with games like Tyranny, which was actually my role-playing game of the year last year that for me on the channel. But Kickstarter's kind of allowed this to happen because a lot of these games, companies who focus test with, 14 to 18-year-olds, these kids probably aren't interested in, point-and-click adventure games or, 90s style games, late 80s style games or whatever. But, and you said you were a backer of Thimbleweed Park. So, I mean, this is something that I personally think is a good thing. And while there have been certainly some games that have been kickstarted, one that we won't mention has a number 9 in the title that may have been disappointing, overall I feel like for people our age this has been kind of a cool time that we've been able to not just get remasters, which studios are usually willing to do because they're not that expensive a prospect, but actually new IPs. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming you think that's a positive thing, being a backer yourself.
I think it could have gone either way. I'll be perfectly honest, Thimbleweed Park has a few flaws.
Okay.
I think it's trying in some parts it's trying too hard to be the throwback late 80s adventure game. And in some cases they are doing it correctly. One thing I have to say is that for Thimbleweed Park, there is an easy mode and a hard mode. If you've never played an adventure game, play it on easy. If you have played like the predecessors or other the other LucasArts or Sierra games, play it on hard mode, and you will remember the soup cans, for instance.
So you can purposely torture yourself.
In fact, that's what I did the first time I played through it. Is I purposely tortured myself.
Do you think? I want to talk about two things actually. Both the whole idea of, should these games be a carbon copy? Because interesting enough, one of the things that we were talking briefly before the show that I mentioned that I can personally find a little bit frustrating is some of these, like CRPGs that have come back, I don't feel like they do as good a job improving things they could improve in, like the user interface, like mapping and things like that. And while I don't necessarily want every game to be Skyrim where I can fast travel anywhere and, or games that have like, here's the yellow brick road that you follow to your next objective, at the same time, I don't like the idea that some of these games were like, you'd have to have like a notepad and take notes because some of the clues were cryptic, and if you forgot something, you may not be able to remember where to go or whatever. But this is a genre that I don't know if it can really be improved much by modernization. I mean, there's basically an inventory and things to click on or whatever. So, have you noticed any major differences, or do you feel like this is pretty much a carbon copy of what we've had before?
Well, I can't speak much from your perspective of things as far as the improving of the UI in those old like Baldur's Gate series. Planescape Torment, I think, was also in that group. But you're the one who it's like, I play Baldur's Gate. I liked it. I just thought that there were parts of it that were like, what's the word? Text heavy, I think.
Yes, definitely.
A lot of reading. And yes, notepad's almost required.
Well, and that I wasn't planning on doing a full playthrough, but I did probably 5 or 6 videos on Tyranny, and you get when I was reading everything aloud, I was like, I'd have to be like, all right, I'm going to take a break because it seems like for this half-an-hour video, I spent 25 minutes of it reading, but yeah, I guess specifically for the point-and-click adventure, though, you had mentioned before about this potentially, about the whole Maniac Mansion thing. If you want to bring that up and talk a little bit about that.
There's you have to remember that the designers for Thimbleweed Park are Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick. They were the ones who designed the original Maniac Mansion in the mid 80s. I can't remember if they also did Day of the Tentacle, which is considered to be the sequel to Maniac Mansion. Thimbleweed Park is not necessarily, it's like a spiritual Maniac Mansion 3, but there are so many throwback references. For instance, there is a refrigerator in Thimbleweed Park that if you open it, the contents of the refrigerator are exactly identical to the contents of the refrigerator in Maniac Mansion.
Nice.
Right down to broken bottles of ketchup. Yeah, also we see that the protagonist, Dave, and the damsel in distress, Sandy, from Maniac Mansion, are now the waitress and the cook in a diner in Thimbleweed
Nice.
Park. And so we now know what happened to Dave and Sandy after the game is over. We also learn that the protagonist from Day of the Tentacle, Bernard, his cousin, works at a not a rest stop, but a 24-hour like stop, like a 7-Eleven, but a knockoff because of copyright infringements.
Right.
So we learn a little bit about some of the characters from the older games in oblique or sometimes blatant references in Thimbleweed Park, aka Maniac Mansion 3.
I was just wondering, but has anything as far as the gameplay actually changed, or is that pretty much the exact same thing as well?
Okay, what visually it looks almost identical to Day of the Tentacle, as far as instead of in Maniac Mansion there were 15 verbs. They streamlined it down to 9 verbs,
Okay.
And then if you've played later adventure games such as Full Throttle, you have 4 verbs, and they don't have screen. They don't have a footprint on the screen all the time. You have to bring up the cursor menu. They went back to Day of the Tentacle for the visual styling. There's the 9 verbs on the bottom left-hand of the screen and your inventory in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, which it works for what it's trying to do. And it's the visual style of the characters in the game are definitely a throwback to the big pixelated heads, small pixelated bodies of Maniac Mansion itself, although with a much expanded color palettes. So it's definitely an homage, but you can definitely tell that they have tweaked the UI and tweaked the graphical settings.
Now this actually I wasn't familiar with, because I do remember, because I'd seen some reviews for Thimbleweed, and in general they've been pretty positive. And I don't remember, with my limited experience, playing a game with multiple characters, but you said that was something that actually happened in quite a few games before this. But is that something you think that works pretty well in this game as well? And my secondary question is, what did you think of the clown? Because I heard quite a bit about him in the reviews as well.
Okay, yeah. You can't discuss Thimbleweed Park without discussing Ransom. But the first part first. You have to remember that in Maniac Mansion you had Dave as the protagonist, but he had help. You had 6 other kids, and you got to choose 2 of them.
Okay.
And you could choose any 2 that you wanted, and the game could be solved and beaten. So you were already juggling the inventory and where the kids were in the mansion. And in Day of the Tentacle, they did something similar. They had 3 kids, and there's a time travel element in Day of the Tentacle. You have 1 kid in the present, you have 1 kid in the future, and 1 kid in the past. When you post this, you may want to put spoiler tags in the low bar just to be on the safe side. Yeah. So you're managing inventory, and what 1 kid does in the past will affect the present and the future, and what 1 kid does in the future can affect the past by passing inventory items back and forth. So people that have played these games and are fans of the genre are used to juggling multiple characters. In Thimbleweed Park, there are 5 people you control, one of which you do not have to worry about in inventory because he is a ghost.
Okay.
But but Franklin's another topic of discussion. Ransom is who he is. Luckily, for his speech bubbles, they bleep him out. He swears a lot. He is a very crass. In fact, he was billed as an insult clown.
Okay.
And he is not Groucho Marx insult. He
Right.
is can't think of a very Andrew Dice Clay insult.
Gotcha.
Very crude, very crass. Yeah. But he actually has a minor story arc. He is a clown that used to be famous. He used to perform sold out shows at the circus until he insulted the wrong woman because she was a gypsy. She cursed him that he could never take his makeup off. And ever since then, he is pretty much everything abandoned him. It's like he lost everything. He lost his fame, lost his fortune. He lives in the rundown circus on the outskirts of town, and part of his agenda, his list of things to do, are things that involve him hopefully getting to the point where he can take his makeup off.
Now real quick, have you ever seen Death to Smoochie?
Yes, I have seen.
Okay, so we're talking about Rainbow Randolph here, in a way.
No. As much as I enjoy Robin Williams films, I do not see. There is, while Ransom the Clown is very raunchy, he is not perverted.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
He will insult a kid in a wheelchair, but he's not going to insult him because he is in a wheelchair. He's going to insult the fact that the wheelchair looks dilapidated.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm because we've been taught by the predecessors to juggle inventory and juggle from controlling one person to another. It's intuitive in this one.
But do you think someone like me, I would still be able to get in and play this, especially if I wanted to go on easy mode, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, if anything, for someone like you who has played many PC games of various genres, I would almost say for someone of your caliber, John, you could jump into hard mode and be okay. You might hit your head on your keyboard a couple times, going, "Okay, how do you do this?" And then when you figure out the solution, it's like, why didn't I think of that 45 minutes ago?
Well, that was actually going to be my next question is, having known the solutions, like I said in the past, some of these games, the solutions were, space logic. They were kind of like sometimes you didn't even understand the solution after you found it. Do you feel like do you feel like that's been improved with this game? That there, once once you figured them out, you were like, okay, I get that.
There's still some moon logic.
Okay.
I'm going to quote a very famous games reviewer, Yahtzee, who does zero punctuation. He criticized the moon logic in Day of the Tentacle, stating that there is a logic thread that starts with stabbing a balloon clown doll and ends with an Egyptian mummy winning a beauty contest. Yes, there is some of that moon logic still in this game. I think it's just part of the charm of the series. Because no normal person would think about putting a hamster in a microwave. But it's something you can do in some of these games. And there's some things where you solve a puzzle, but there's no payoff, oddly enough. There are puzzle strings that give you nothing except maybe a Steam achievement. So just keep that in mind.
Gotcha.
Even if you're working on a puzzle, it might not be a puzzle that advances the plot. There's, I think, 4 or 5 of those in the game.
I understand. I'm having a debate with that right now. I'm playing Hollow Knight, which is a game I recommend for everyone. Go watch my video on it. But there is a arena sort of combat in that, which I got through the first 2 sections, and the third section is just insane. And it's one of those endurance tests where, like, say there's 20 waves, and you can get through the first 15 fine, but that takes you maybe 15 minutes or whatever, and then you die, and then you got, and you don't need to, don't want to give away spoilers. I'll just say there are multiple endings, and it's not necessary to do it, but if you want to 100% it, I believe you have to do it, or at least get certain achievements or whatever. So yeah, I'm having that debate myself and deciding if I want to bang my head against the wall, but that's a different sort of just insane difficulty rather than moon logic. And yeah, I actually saw that from Yahtzee as well. All right, now one thing about this, I just wanted to briefly mention, and because we're talking about this whole revival of things, but the whole idea of are we enjoying this because it's nostalgia, or, you know, is this still really fun? And, you know, is this a game that somebody who hasn't played this genre basically would be interested in? I'm bringing up specifically because of the reviews on Yooka-Laylee that Jim Sterling famously didn't really like, and basically one of his arguments was like, this actually isn't all that, you know, the collectathon 3D platformer, this was the early days of 3D, we didn't know how to do it well, the camera was bad, and it was great at the time because we hadn't seen anything like this before, but maybe it's actually not all that fun now. But I'm wondering, is this kind of a timeless genre, though? Is this something you think that younger players who are interested would still definitely enjoy it without having a lot of experience?
Okay, well, that's actually, you actually triggered something else in the back of my mind on that one, because I was thinking back to, okay, will a younger kid be able to enjoy Thimbleweed Park? Probably yes, on easy.
Okay.
Because on hard, and I remember this thinking back, the game is set in 1987.
Okay.
And there are 2 places where you have to prove you're up to date on current events. And some of the questions they ask you to prove that, they're general knowledge questions to you or I or anybody else who's in their 30s, early 40s. To a teenager, they're going, what? Huh? So I could see there being a slight stumbling block there. But yes, Kickstarter is allowing people like us to throw our money and relive nostalgia. Yeah. And as long as we're aware that we're doing that, what's the harm? It can be used to fix things that were not so great during that era. In fact, side note, Thimbleweed Park's actually pretty good as far as racial representation amongst the main characters. One of the FBI detectives is definitely codes as Latino, and there are African Americans amongst the NPCs that I remember. In fact, I believe she's a newspaper reporter, actually. And I believe the other FBI agent you control, even though they don't come out and say it outright, I believe she's Japanese. So, of the 5 playable characters, yes, and the other one is a woman who is very smart. In fact, she knows computer programming. So there's definitely very good representation across the spectrum there. So kudos to the developers on that.
Yeah, it's funny. That's something I didn't even really think to ask about. But now you bring that up, that's a really good point. And I know there are plenty of people on the internet that like to debate the whole representation of people, whether it be of different genders, ethnicities, lifestyles, or whatever.
My opinion is, as long as the game's good and it doesn't feel like it's tacked on, what's the harm?
Well, no, and I mean, I absolutely agree. That the one thing that I do think is an interesting debate is sometimes I've noticed in, I don't want to point out BioWare specifically, but it's an example I can think of where it's like, okay, we're going to bring up this alternative lifestyle, but instead of just having a character with an alternative lifestyle and that being it and just representing that, it's more of like, we're going to point out how okay it is and how we think it's okay as a company, and it ends up feeling like awkward rather than, just representing something.
It needs to feel organic.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I do think it's a good point to bring up. Just that, that's one of the things that has changed, and I think probably for the positive there. But I did want to mention briefly. This is a game that I haven't played, but I've seen a playthrough of most of it because I wanted this to be also a general discussion about the return of the genre and people our age being able to live that nostalgia and younger gamers being able to get into a genre that without Kickstarter probably would be entirely dead at this point. I watched quite a bit of a game called Paradigm, which is also available on Steam right now, recently came out. And I just wanted to mention it because if you are interested in this genre, it might be worth checking out if you are interested in something completely zany. I heard a comment from the designer that basically they'd had some weird dreams and threw a bunch of stuff in a game. I mean, the characters involve a human-sized talking sloth, a plant that likes to beatbox randomly, And while it seems from my limited experience and from what I've seen that a lot of these games, obviously like Gabriel Knight or whatever, had a more serious tone, but a lot of these games had a silly sense of humor was kind of a common theme in these games, and it seems like this is a game that kind of took that silly sense of humor and turned it up to 11. So just one of the things I try to do on this channel is throw stuff out there that you may not have heard about. So I thought I would mention that briefly as well.
As far as the adventure game genre, they seem to almost always have their zany meter stuck in between 6 and 8.
Yeah.
Just be aware of madcap humor in some things. Sam and Max Hit the Road. I mean, it was based on a comic book about a dog in a suit and a fedora, and a sidekick rabbit with a tendency for malevolent violence.
So overall, though, I mean, I would assume that this is something that we're kind of both happy about. Now, I know we're specifically talking about this genre, but the the ability to, because for me personally, unless it's a game I haven't played, I don't get very excited about the whole remaster thing. But having new content in a genre that's kind of died, which I'm still kind of looking for new content. What am I looking for? Real-time strategy games. More in the lines of like Command and Conquer and that, because it's a genre that people have attempted to bring back. And actually, I'm gonna. You were mentioning Yahtzee. I'll bring up Total Biscuit, who talked a bit about how he feels like a lot of these studios are trying to capture the complexity of StarCraft, where really that's what people say they want, but really what they want is the simplicity and just the stomping on the computer and the silly the things that you could kind of do in early Command and Conquer games, that people want to have fun with these games. And while certainly there is a competitive nature to them, people have StarCraft and StarCraft 2. What they really want is to have fun with these games, and it seems like we are getting quite a bit of that in several genres, and specifically we're talking about the point-and-click adventure. But like I said, I really enjoyed Tyranny, and I'm hoping if I remember, I'll put it in the comments. But I'm hoping the Symphony of the Night spiritual successor will also be. Did you play that actually? Just real quick, Symphony of the Night.
No, I have my exposure to Castlevania was a little bit of Castlevania 2, and I was way too young to understand the mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just old enough when Castlevania 3 came out that I was able to play it and master it. In fact, I remember beating it at least 3 times using each of the 3 companions you could pick up along the way, just to be able to say I did it.
No, I was bringing up mostly because for me, I'd mentioned Hollow Knight previous, and to me, that is potentially a new masterpiece in that genre. It's Hollow Knight.
Okay, I thought you said Shovel Knight. That sounds like a Mega
Man. Shovel Knight is also an interesting, and actually, I want to bring Shovel Knight up because I was talking about updating games from the past, not just reproducing it. And I feel like Shovel Knight is a game that did that fantastically, because there's a lot of games out there that are like, oh, we're trying to be this era a game. But Shovel Knight said, okay, we're going to kind of look like this era of a game, but better in subtle ways. But we're going to improve the gameplay and the mechanisms and make a game that is not only gives us the feels of playing those nostalgic games, but is genuinely just a good game in and of itself. And I think that may be actually the best example of that.
In fact, there's one other thing that these modern reinterpretations do that the old ones couldn't, is because they're usually through a online service like Steam or Xbox Online or the PlayStation, whatever their store's called. They can push an update out,
right,
like that. Weed Park, they pushed one out like within the week because they realized that there were like 4 or 5 bugs that the playtesting didn't catch, and they went, "Oh, okay. So instead of a broken disc that we have to recall and do that, now we just push an update out through the Steam platform and boom, fixed."
Yeah, no, that is a huge deal, and I mean, not that the point-click adventure game is likely to have a lot of DLC, but I know, Shovel Knight is constantly coming out with new stuff. Or are they? Do you know something? All right.
I know that it's been said in an interview or two, there will be that's either going to be a DLC or a free patch for Thimbleweed Park because they ran out of time. They want to open up one place in town that they couldn't get finished.
Ah, cool.
There's an arcade on one of the streets that you cannot enter because they say it's just closed and locked and boarded up. They wanted you to be able to go in there. And they say, yeah, we're still going to code this out so you can go into the arcade and play the video games inside.
Excellent.
But it wasn't ready when launch day came.
Well, yeah, and yeah, there's definitely one of the advantages of modern times. And like I said, Shovel Knight's always come out with new stuff. I've heard Hollow Knight's going to do some DLC, which I'm excited for. And did you want to give out your number while we're talking about
Okay, so
not your actual number, but
Park.
Yes.
You can call me up. I am in the phone book, and I can be reached at 1276.
Excellent. Yeah, I want to throw that in there in case anybody wants to hear more from Steve. But I don't know if you had any final thoughts or not. But for me, in general, I am excited to have the genre back that I have limited experience in. But for most of all, I'm just excited to have some quality content out there. So we gave you a couple suggestions of things you might want to look at if you enjoy that. And I'm glad that thanks to Kickstarter and these digital distribution platforms that, you know, we have some things available to us we wouldn't have otherwise in old business models and whatnot. So pretty excited about that and just want to let people know about it. I don't know if you had anything to add or...
No, John, you've covered all of it. Thank you for having me on your podcast, and thank you. Hope maybe we can do this again in like a month or so if another topic that interests us comes up.
Yeah, it sounds great because I just for anyone watching, I'm not planning on like time schedules and everything, not doing this full time just as a hobby. I'm not planning on doing like a weekly thing, but maybe doing more of these individual topic things. Well, again, thanks a lot for being here. I really enjoyed it and your insights into the genre. And like you said, maybe we'll get a chance to do this again sometime soon. So thanks a lot for watching, everybody. And like I said, if you want to help the channel grow, comments, likes, even dislikes, and subscriptions, shares, all that do help the channel. And we appreciate you guys watching. And let me know if you guys enjoyed this and if you want to see more. And we'll talk to you guys again soon.